Warm greetings to everyone. Myself Rakshita. Today I will be explaining about what is laboratory method in science pedagogy. First, let us understand what is laboratory method. So basically in science, it is very important that the laboratory method is used. So it is considered as an important method in science teaching. It was mainly introduced in the year 1919. It is based on learning by doing, where you can see that the students are performing the experiments in the laboratory, and that is how they come to learn more clearly about the concept. There are certain definitions given by. First one is the H.E. Armstrong, who says that the laboratory method involves placing the students in the position of the discoverer, where he learns science by performing experiments and finding out facts for himself. Whereas John Dewey says that the laboratory method is a method of teaching in which learning takes place through doing and experiencing rather than through verbal instructions. Next, we will move on to the objectives of the laboratory method. The first one is the skill development, where there is manipulative skills, inquiry, and investigation skills developed. And at the end, organizational and communicational skills are developed in a student. So, this basically happens due to when the students are performing any kind of experiment, they understand that why are we not getting the result. So, that is when they try to fix the problem and they understand what is manipulative skills. Whereas when they're performing any kind of experiment, they develop some doubts related to the experiment where they try to uh, clear the doubts with the teacher. Next is the organizational skills, whereas in laboratory method, we know that if an experiment has to be done, it has to be in a proper order or in a proper step. So that is where they also learn organizational skills and communication skills, where they interact with the teachers or the peers present around them, so as to clear their doubts. Next is the cognitive development, where they understand or they develop the reasoning ability, critical thinking, and problem solving ability. Again, as I told, that during an experiment, when they are performing it, they understand why this is the outcome or why are we got this as the result. So they are more good in reasoning, then they understand the procedure, they understand the observation, they come to a conclusion, so which also helps them to develop critical thinking. Again, while doing any kind of experiment, there might be problems while doing the procedure or while observing. So that is how the students will also learn about problem solving ability. Next comes the scientific understanding, which is an important aspect in the science. First, they understand or develop scientific methodology, application of the knowledge. So if they are performing any kind of experiment, they can relate it to real life applications. There's correlation between branches of science. That is how they come to know about it. Next, we will understand important principles of the laboratory method. The first one includes motivation of teacher and students. When the students are kept at the center and they are performing any kind of experiment in the laboratory, it also helps to motivate the teachers and the students to learn those concepts. Next, scope for creativity and innovation. Every child is different. So when he or she tries to perform the experiment, it might happen that some or the other child comes up with new innovations and creativity while doing the experiment. Clear objectives of the experiments are stated beforehand, so there is no problem while delivering the lecture or the concept with this method. Next is the organized and systematic work. Again, whenever we are performing any kind of experiment, it is made sure that we have proper kind of procedure which has to go in stepwise manner. So it is a systematic and organized work. Next is proper explanation of apparatus and procedure. So before starting with the laboratory work or any kind of experiment, the teacher states proper which apparatus to be used and what is the procedure of the experiment. Next, interest in experiments. The students who are interested in experiments actually enjoy this laboratory method, whereas some other students who are not interested in studying also might develop interest, because when they are doing by themselves, they're observing the results, they develop interest in experiments. Next, we will understand common laboratory approaches that are used in school. First one is verification and reduction. So usually students learn or they understand the theory. So that is usually the lecture method. But when that lecture method or that concept is verified in the laboratory, that is known as usually verification and deduction approach, which is mostly used by many schools around. Next is the induction method. Here, students discover concepts by themselves based on the examples or based on the experiment that they are performing. Next is the inquiry learning. So, when the students are performing any kind of experiments in the laboratory, they develop questions, they frame the questions, and that is when scientific thinking develops in them. So these questions are then answered by either the teachers or the lab assistant or by the peers, and that is how it encourages hypothesis and analysis. So the students would understand that what question they are asking, is it actually relatable to the experiment or is it not relatable to the experiment, and that is how they analyze the experiment. Next is the discovery learning. So, learning through self exploration happens in the laboratory method. This also helps the students to retain the information that they have learned through the experiment because they are observing, they are doing it by themselves. Next is the problem based learning. So, learning through problem solving, where the teacher guides the students to find the solution for the problems that are facing the students are facing in the laboratory. Next, we will understand methods of conducting the practical laboratory work. First one is the group rotation method. Here, what happens? The class is divided into groups. For example, if I have 20 students in a class, I might make four groups, each group having five students in it. And then the work or the experiment is done by rotation method. So the examples of these methods of conducting the practical laboratory will be shown in the next slide. Next is the division of the part method. Here, it is mainly used for the complex or lengthy experiments which take a lot of time. So here they try not to include all the students, but call them out in groups and make them work out. So here the groups are larger as compared to the group and rotation method. Like in rotation method, each group is doing the same thing again and again after each one. Whereas in division of part method, if one group is doing that part of the experiment, the other group is doing the second part of the experiment and not the first one. So that is the difference between the group and the division method. Last one is the class method, where all students get a chance to perform the experiment together, where it also requires sufficient materials. So when the class method is considered, it is one of the best method because each and every child is learning by doing. Next, we will understand the examples. For example, if it's a group or a rotation method, as I told you that if I have a class of 20 students, I'm dividing them into five and a group of four. So what happens if I'm doing the photosynthesis experiment? Group A will set up the plant in sunlight. Group B tests the leaf for starch using iodine, and Group C observes and records the color change. After a fixed time, group rotates, so all students experience each step. So this is the advantage of group rotation method. Next is the division or part method, where suppose the students are studying the human digestive system, so it can be divided into groups. So if group one is doing about mouth and salivary glands, group two does for esophagus and stomach, group three is observing about what is small intestine, and the group four is doing what is large intestine and rectum. Whereas in class method, if example, the class is doing an experiment or they're observing a slide based on onion peel so that they can see the different stages of cell division. So each student takes an onion peel and prepares a slide, adds stains, and places it under microscope. All students observe plant cells and draw diagrams. So here each and every child is getting an opportunity at the same time to carry out the practical in the laboratory. Next, we will understand the steps of laboratory method. So this is the first method. There are two methods. We will be discussing about both the methods. In the first method, first, the teacher will announce what is the aim of the experiment. Next, the preparation and the procedure. So teacher will first guide the students about how the procedure is, what are the requirements for the practical. Next, after performing the practical or the experiment, the students are asked to observe and record the data that they can analyze. And then as the analysis and interpretation, whatever observation they have made, according to that, they will conclude and analyze why this is the result of an experiment. And at the end, conclusion is written by the students. And of course, the precautions are written at the end in the journals, whereas in the laboratory method, the teacher instructs about the precautions at the start of the experiment itself. This is the second method in which the step one is preparation. So, for example, The teacher has to make sure that all the apparatus are present in the laboratory and the things are kept at the place so that the students do not need to roam around the laboratory. Next is the actual work period where the students start performing the experiment. And at the end is the culminating activities, which includes that they observe, they analyze, and they come to a conclusion about the practical. Next, let us understand about the merits of laboratory method. The first one includes that it develops manipulative skills. So again, while doing any kind of experiment, they might face some problems, but they should be aware of how they can get the results. So that is how they develop manipulative skills. Next, it enhances the critical thinking. Again, the student will think critically about why is the reaction happening between any two chemicals, or why is this the result and not the other way. It promotes understanding of the scientific process. They would understand why the end result is uh, obtained by understanding the process of what is happening in an experiment. So learning by doing is one of the most important aspect of laboratory method. Next, it encourages cooperation. So when the students are working in groups in a laboratory, they understand how to cooperate with each other to get a proper result. It increases interest in science. Again, it's just not passive listening. The students themselves are trying to perform the experiment and get results so that they can actually analyze between the theory and the practical that they are doing. Next, let us understand about the limitations. The first one is it requires well-equipped laboratory. So it cannot happen that the students walks into the laboratory and there are no apparatus present which are necessary for performing an experiment. So it is very important that the school has well-equipped laboratory. Next, it is time consuming. Again, when the laboratory method is considered, each and every child takes his or her own time to perform the experiment. So it is time consuming. Next, limited number of students. So for example, if a class has 50 students, not all 50 students can do the experiment at the same time. So it might be divided into groups or batches and then they are carried. So limited number of students is one limitation. Next, it needs trained teachers. It cannot happen that any teacher can make the students perform the experiments in the laboratory. There has to be trained teachers present in the laboratory so that they can guide the students about proper protocol of using the apparatus or performing an experiment. Next, it requires manuals and handbooks. So students are supposed to have the manuals and handbooks with them while they are performing the experiment so that they have the procedure with them accordingly. So again, manuals and making handbooks for each and every child is difficult, so that can be a limitation in this. Next is it difficult to manage separate lab periods. As I told you that if the class length is much higher, so in number if it's higher, like if it's a class of 50 students, so managing the two batches at different time period and again setting up the entire experiment for the next batch is difficult. So that is the another limitation. This is the entire mind map for the laboratory method where you can clearly see it with just keywords it is being explained. And these are some of the references that I've referred to make this presentation. And thank you.